In the world of rock music, vanishing acts don't go unnoticed. When an artist disappears, no press, no social media, no explanation, it creates a vacuum that fans and media scramble to fill with rumors. But few exits have ever been as quiet, as complete, or as haunting as that of John Deacon. He was the silent architect behind some of Queen's most unforgettable songs. Another one bites the dust. I Want to Break Free, You're My Best Friend. His bass lines weren't just background, they were the backbone. His songwriting helped define Queen's eclectic style. And yet, while his bandmates remained visible, releasing music, giving interviews, collaborating with new frontmen, John Deacon disappeared completely. No interviews, no guest appearances, not even a quick wave at Queen's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For more than 30 years, he hasn't stepped onto a stage, picked up a bass in public, or spoken about the band that made him a legend. While millions sang along to his melodies, John quietly stepped away from it all. And the question that's haunted fans ever since is why? Was it personal conflict? Was he pushed out? Was the spotlight too much for a man known for shyness? Or was it something even deeper? Now, after decades of complete silence, family sources are finally breaking the quiet, and their revelations confirm what many suspected but few ever truly understood. John didn't leave Queen because of ego or anger. He left because something inside him broke, because Freddie Mercury's death wasn't just the loss of a friend, it was the end of something sacred. What you're about to hear isn't just the story of a rock star walking away. It's a story of grief, loyalty, and a man who chose peace over fame and silence over compromise. The truth behind John Deacon's disappearance is more human and more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. When Freddie Mercury died on November 24, 1991, the world stopped. Tributes came pouring in from every corner of the globe. News anchors mourned. Artists cried on stage. Fans lit candles outside Freddie's home for weeks. For the music industry, it was the loss of a titan. For Queen, it was the unraveling of a bond that had been built over decades. And for John Deacon, it was something even worse. It was the end. Initially, John seemed to hold it together. He played through the 1992 Freddie Mercury tribute concert, backing up legends like Elton John, David Bowie, and George Michael. He helped complete the Made in Heaven album, built around the last vocals Freddie had ever recorded. And in 1997, he quietly joined Brian and Roger one last time for a tribute song. No one but you, only the good die young. But what no one realized at the time was that each of those moments wasn't a comeback. They were goodbyes. After that final track, John went completely silent. Not gradually, completely. No more studio work, no more tours, no more public appearances. He declined interviews, rejected press inquiries, and refused to join his bandmates for performances, even on the biggest stages. Award shows, documentaries, Queen anniversaries, he turned them all down. Every time the band resurfaced, fans asked, "Where's John?" And the answer was always the same: he's not coming. The silence sparked endless speculation. Some assumed it was depression. Others believed it was a falling out with Brian and Roger. Rumors swirled about business disagreements, stage fright, creative frustration. But those close to John say the truth was far simpler and far more devastating. John wasn't angry. He was grieving. And in his mind, the band didn't survive Freddie's death. Without him, Queen wasn't Queen. It was a memory, a chapter that had closed. The stage, the fans, the spotlight, it all reminded him of something that could never be replicated. So he walked away, not in protest, but in mourning. And in a world where every artist fights for relevance and every band clings to the spotlight, John's silence was almost louder than any comeback tour could ever be. He didn't need applause to validate his legacy. He had already said everything he needed to say through music. And with Freddie gone, there was no encore that could ever feel right. To understand why John Deacon's disappearance hit so hard, you have to understand what Queen lost when he left. He wasn't just the bassist. He was the band's hidden engine, the quiet architect of songs that millions still know by heart. And while Freddie, Brian, and Roger captured headlines with their big personalities and bigger performances, John shaped the music in ways that most fans never realized. He joined Queen in 1971, completing a lineup that would go on to define a generation. But unlike his flamboyant bandmates, John avoided the spotlight from day one. He didn't sing, he didn't showboat, he didn't crave attention. But when it came to songwriting, his fingerprints were everywhere. Another one bites the dust. That was John. A track so bold, so different, it shocked everyone, including the band. It wasn't just a rock hit. It crossed over into R&B and pop charts, opening Queen up to entirely new audiences. I Want to Break Free, also John, an anthem of liberation that resonated worldwide. You're My Best Friend, John again, blending perfect pop with heartfelt simplicity. Each track was different, each one was vital, and each proved that behind his quiet demeanor was a creative powerhouse. But his impact wasn't limited to melodies. John was also Queen's financial strategist. In the band's early days, when deals could make or break their future, John kept a close eye on the numbers. He managed budgets, reviewed contracts, and kept things steady behind the scenes. Brian May once said, John didn't say much, but when he did, it was always worth listening to. So when John disappeared, Queen didn't just lose a bassist. They lost a voice that helped shape their direction. A composer who gave their music balance, a steady hand in the chaos, and maybe most importantly, they lost the one member who never wanted the spotlight, just the sound. While the world saw Freddie Mercury as the face of Queen, those inside the band knew something else. The emotional core of Queen wasn't just one man. It was the bond between its four members, especially between Freddie and John. On the surface, they couldn't have been more different. Freddie was bold, outrageous, electric. He was the definition of a showman. John, by contrast, was quiet, methodical, introverted. He spoke carefully, worked privately, and often let the others take the spotlight. But beneath those differences was a connection that ran deep, musically and emotionally. Freddie trusted John. He respected his judgment. And in moments when things got tense, whether creatively or personally, John was often the calm in the storm. He wasn't loud, but he was steady. And that quiet support meant everything to Freddie. So when Freddie was diagnosed with AIDS around 1987, John was one of the first to know. According to family sources, he didn't just offer sympathy, he offered presence. He stood by Freddie through the worst years of his illness. He kept showing up, kept playing, kept giving everything he had to the music, even when he was watching his friend slip away. Recording the Miracle and Innuendo albums, created during Freddie's decline, wasn't just difficult, it was devastating. Every session was laced with unspoken grief, every lyric layered with finality. For John, it wasn't just work. It was loss in real time, a slow-motion goodbye. And when Freddie finally passed in 1991, John's grief wasn't loud. It didn't explode in the press. It didn't result in tell-all interviews. It simply consumed him. Brian May later reflected, "I think losing Freddie was very hard for him. He took it incredibly hard." Roger Taylor was even more direct. "John freaked out. He couldn't deal with it. That was it for him. It wasn't drama. It wasn't anger. It was heartbreak. Because for John, Freddie wasn't just a singer. He was Queen. And without him, the magic was gone." In the years immediately following Freddie Mercury's death, John Deacon didn't vanish overnight. He tried. He wanted to honor Freddie's memory, to show respect in the only way he knew how, through music. But every note he played seemed to echo with absence. Every performance reminded him of what they had lost. On April 20th, 1992, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley Stadium became a global moment of remembrance. The surviving members of Queen performed alongside legends like David Bowie, George Michael, and Elton John. The crowd of 72,000 sang every lyric. Millions more watched on television. It was one of rock history's most emotional nights, and it was one of John's last. According to family insiders, John agreed to perform because it felt like the right thing to do. But behind the scenes, he was deeply uncomfortable. Watching other singers take the stage in Freddie's place felt wrong, forced, even disrespectful. The world celebrated Freddie's legacy, but to John, it felt like an imitation, a recreation of something that could never be brought back. Still, he pressed on for a few more years. In 1995, Queen released Made in Heaven, an album constructed around vocal tracks Freddie had recorded before his death. The sessions were brutal. John, Brian, and Roger were essentially creating new music around a ghost, building songs with a voice that was no longer alive. It was emotionally torturous. By the time they released No One But You, Only the Good Die Young in 1997, a tribute written by Brian May and sung by both May and Taylor, John was hanging by a thread. He played bass on the track, appeared in the music video, but behind the scenes, it was already over. The moment the final note faded, so did he. His last public performance came just days later at Maurice Béjart's Ballet for Life premiere in Paris. Queen performed The Show Must Go On with Elton John. It was meant to be a moment of honor, closure, even celebration. But for John, it was goodbye. The appearance was brief, almost reluctant, and after that night, he was never seen on stage again. No tours, no reunions, no public statements. It was as if the final thread holding him to Queen had been cut. As the years passed, Brian May and Roger Taylor moved forward. They started performing again, first with Paul Rodgers, later with Adam Lambert. The shows sold out. Fans came in droves. Queen was reborn for a new generation. But not for John. To him, Queen was never meant to evolve. It was never supposed to adapt. It was for people, only for. And when one of them died, the band died too. Family members confirmed what fans had long suspected. John saw Queen not as a brand or a legacy to preserve, but as a bond, a living, breathing unit that only worked when Freddie, Brian, Roger, and himself were all together. Anything else wasn't Queen. It was just a tribute act, no matter how good the music sounded. He wasn't bitter toward his bandmates. He didn't condemn their choices. But he couldn't be part of something that, to him, felt like an echo of what once was. John's philosophy was clear. You don't replace Freddie Mercury. You can't. Not just his voice, but his presence, his charisma, his creativity. There was no substitute, no second act, not without him. And so John chose silence, not as a protest, not as a dramatic exit, but as an act of loyalty to Freddie, to the original band, to the memory of something he considered sacred. In interviews over the years, both Brian and Roger have admitted they miss him, that they wish he'd join them again. But they also say they understand. As Roger Taylor once put it, he just didn't want to deal with it anymore. He found it all too much. And maybe that's the most honest explanation of all. Most rock stars don't retire quietly. They write memoirs, headline reunion tours, or launch solo careers to relive the glory days. But John Deacon, he did none of that. He stepped away not just from the stage, but from the entire idea of celebrity. And for over 2 decades, he's lived like he never belonged to one of the greatest bands of all time. After his final performance in 1997, John retreated into a life that couldn't be more different from the chaos of Queen's heyday. While Brian, May, and Roger Taylor kept performing around the world, John planted his roots firmly in a quiet suburb of southwest London. Far from the headlines, far from the noise, the man who once stood in front of screaming arenas now spends his days behind the same closed doors he's kept shut for years. He's been married to his wife Veronica since 1975, a relationship that predates Queen's rise to superstardom. Together, they raised 6 children. And unlike so many rock and roll families torn apart by the pressure of fame, John's home life remained steady, grounded, normal. He didn't trade in his role as a husband and father for one more moment under the spotlight. He traded the spotlight for them. Friends and former colleagues describe him as reclusive, yes, but not bitter, not sad, just done. Done with fame, done with cameras, done with being John Deacon from Queen. What mattered to him wasn't preserving a public image, it was preserving peace, and he had the means to do it. John's financial legacy is nothing short of extraordinary. Thanks to writing credits on Queen's biggest commercial hits, particularly Another One Bites the Dust, his royalty earnings have never stopped flowing. His net worth is estimated between $130 million and $170 million, and much of it continues to grow without him ever lifting a finger. His music still plays everywhere, from movie soundtracks and streaming playlists to sports arenas and global advertising campaigns. But what's remarkable isn't the wealth. It's the fact that he's never used it for attention, never flaunted it, never chased a second act. He could have bought a mansion in Los Angeles, launched his own label, headlined solo tours for millions of nostalgic fans, but he didn't, because John wasn't interested in reliving the past. He was interested in leaving it intact, and that's what makes his retreat so fascinating. In an industry where silence is often mistaken for failure, John's silence became a statement. He didn't fall, he didn't fade. He chose to disappear. Not because he didn't care about the music, but because he cared about it too much to watch. It becomes something it was never meant to be. In a band filled with giants, John Deacon stood still, while Freddie Mercury mesmerized crowds with a voice that could command oceans, and Brian May shredded through solos that became rock anthems. John remained the constant, a quiet storm at the center of chaos. He didn't need to be loud, he didn't need the spotlight, because when you build something timeless, you don't need to shout to be heard. And that's what makes his absence so striking. In the years since he left the stage, Queen's music has only grown in stature. New fans discover the band every day. Queen's catalogue still dominates charts, streams, and stadiums. Their biopic Bohemian Rhapsody brought in nearly $1 billion worldwide, introducing a new generation to their legend. Brian May and Roger Taylor continue to tour with Adam Lambert. They perform the classics, They celebrate the past, but they do it with one piece forever missing. There's a reason John Deacon's name still draws whispers. Not just because he left, but how he left, quietly, cleanly, with purpose. In a world where artists fade out or flame out, John made the rarest move of all. He walked away at the height of his relevance and never once tried to reclaim it. No farewell tour, no Instagram post, no comeback album, just silence. And somehow, that silence became his loudest statement. He didn't need to defend his legacy. It speaks for itself. Every thundering pulse of another one bites the dust. Every shimmering bass line in Under Pressure. Every note of You're My Best Friend. Written for the very woman he still wakes up beside every morning. His songs didn't just chart. They stuck. They lived. They became part of the human experience, woven into soundtracks of heartbreak, celebration, rebellion, and healing. And maybe that's the most poetic part of John Deacon's story. While others performed to hold on to their past, John trusted that his music would do the work, that the chords would carry him further than any interview ever could, that the legacy would live on not because of how often he appeared, but because of what he left behind. There's something sacred in that. There's something almost mythical about a man who refuses to dilute what he helped build, who turns down millions just to preserve the art exactly as it was, who decides that the loudest loyalty is refusing to replace what's been lost, because, to John, Queen wasn't a machine that could keep turning. It wasn't a brand. It wasn't even about music anymore. It was four people, just four. And when one of them left this world, the band in his heart ended too. He wasn't just being respectful, he was being honest. And honesty, true, unshakable honesty, is rare in the world of fame. It's not flashy, it doesn't sell tickets, but it lasts. So today, when fans talk about Queen's legacy, they talk about the performances, the innovation, the genre-defining catalogue of music. But when they talk about integrity, when they talk about loyalty that doesn't crack under pressure, they talk about John Deacon. He didn't leave because he had nothing left to say. He left because he had already said everything worth saying. And then, in the purest act of grace, he let it echo forever. When John Deacon left Queen, it wasn't with a bang, it was with a whisper. No grand exit, no headlines, no emotional statements, just a man stepping off stage and never returning. And in that decision, he did something almost no one in the entertainment world dares to do. He let go. In the years since, his silence has become one of the most profound and powerful choices in music history. Not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. Because in an industry obsessed with attention, Deacon made the radical choice to disappear. To live not as an icon, but as a human being. To trade applause for authenticity, and to protect something most people don't even realize can be lost. Dignity. Think about how rare that is. Artists spend decades building legacies, only to spend the next decades trying to preserve them, often reshaping, rebranding, reinventing themselves over and over again just to keep up. But John didn't chase relevance. He didn't capitalize on nostalgia. He didn't seek credit. He already knew what he had created, and he didn't need to prove anything more. He walked away not because he had nothing left to say, but because he had already said the most important things through music, through action, through loyalty. And when that message was complete, he chose silence as his final verse. But that silence wasn't empty, it was full of meaning. It was full of everything he didn't say publicly, but lived privately. Grief, love, loyalty, and the belief that what he had with Queen, especially with Freddie Mercury, was something sacred, something that couldn't and shouldn't be replicated. Even now, decades later, his absence lingers in every Queen performance. Every time the band walks on stage with a new singer, every time they're honored with awards, every time Freddie's voice echoes across the stadium, fans still ask the question, "Where's John?" And in a way, that question is the answer. He's not on stage. He's not in interviews. He's not reliving the past. Because for John Deacon, the music wasn't just art. It was a memory, a friendship, a moment in time that was never meant to be rebooted. And by stepping away, he didn't betray that moment. He preserved it, and that's what sets him apart. While the world celebrated Freddie's brilliance, while Brian and Roger carried the flame through the decades, John did something far more difficult. He stayed in the shadows, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. He believed that Queen wasn't just a band, it was a bond. And when that bond broke, he didn't try to replace it. He simply let it go. No fanfare, no drama, just the quietest exit from one of the loudest legacies in music. And somehow, that silence continues to echo louder than ever.